everybody. Thanks for having me here today. I'm going to try and, this is going to test all my motor controls and do all these things at once. I have a water up here. If I cough, it's not because I'm sick. I'm just a disgusting smoker, so I apologize for that. Okay. So I'm the executive director of OneEleven, which is basically a tech incubator in Toronto. We take care of scaling technology companies. We help them grow. We help them try and be good employers, to produce good products, to have access to customers and investment, things like that. I worked in the mayor's office for 3 years. I was his director of strategic initiatives and did a lot of government modernization work. Before that, I worked for the provincial government under Kathleen Wynne, and I've worked in the private sector. So I've kind of, and the media, so I've sort of seen things from all angles. Okay, so this is a swimming pool. Who in the room, show me your hands if you've worked in municipal government or in government in general. Andy, I'm gonna count you. Okay. Out of those people, how many of you guys know how to build a swimming pool? How many of you could project manage the construction of a swimming pool? You know how to like pour the concrete, build it from the ground up? Anybody? Okay, one person can build a swimming pool. That's awesome. Okay, so now who doesn't work in government? Put up your hands. Why won't this move? Sorry, bear with me for 1 second. Okay. You don't work in government, you probably like to swim. A lot of you like to swim. But how many of you can tell me the necessary amount of chlorine for a swimming pool that has about 690,000 gallons of water? How many of you guys know how to deploy seasonal unionized recreation staff and how to place swimming pools to make sure that there's access for like high needs populations? Do you guys know how to do that? When you're thinking about swimming, do you think about those things? Probably not. Okay. I talk about swimming pools a lot when I talk to government leaders, to politicians, about technology solutions or the need to fix Presto or wait lists or online payment or anything like that. When I talk about these systems, I say, we need to fix these systems. And they'll say, well, I don't know anything about technology. I'm not a technologist. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to build those things. I don't know what you're talking about. And I say, okay, but you don't know how to build a swimming pool either, right? You don't know how to build a swimming pool. But you know that people like to swim, you know that they're necessary infrastructure, and you know that when people do swim, you need to keep them safe, you need to build them well, you need to staff them well, you need to take care of the people that use those pools. And I talk about this with tech people too, right? Because just because you want to swim doesn't mean you want to sacrifice your assumptions of safety, of hygiene, of fairness, of access, right? You expect things to be built well and to take care of you and to pose no threat and to be fair. And the truth of the matter is that building things is hard, whether it's a swimming pool or if it's digital infrastructure or services. Those things are hard. And we have to build them safely and fairly and sustainably for everyone, and that's a tough thing to do. But that does not mean that it cannot be done. So how do we do it? Where do we start, and how do we kind of equip both sides of the equation, the government side and the vendor side, the technology side, the civic tech side, to work together effectively and for the people? What does government need to know about tech, and where do we start? Services can save democracy, and I don't know if Jamie's still in the room, but Jamie from BC talked about this as well, and I was so happy to hear her say it. I really believe that this is true. We live in a time right now when many people are really distant from government. They don't see institutions like government or the media or education as having a positive benefit in their lives. And if we care about the state of our society, and we really should, especially right now, we need to bring people back to that. We need to bring people back to the promise of government and the fundamentally positive role it can play. And I think technology can do this through better service delivery. And for me, as a cities thing, and I think this applies to all government, and I'm happy to hear people from the federal and provincial government talk about this too. But for me, I think that cities are where the tide can turn on this. I think that cities are kind of the location and the mechanism for democratic renewal. The cities like Toronto are home to millions of people of all ages and backgrounds and incomes and professions and ideological leanings. But cities are also where government lives in the closest proximity to people's lives. I have a favorite uncle, and he once asked me, what is the difference between this and that? And the answer is proximity. That is something over there. That government is wasting my money. That government is broken. That thing doesn't work and doesn't have any impact on my life. This is something right here. This is my garbage being picked up. This is the soccer league that I want to sign my kid up for. This is how long it takes me to get home every day and to get to the bus stop in my part of town. This is the cost of my rent. This is the parking ticket that I would like to pay online. Cities are where we find the greatest proximity between people and services, which is what government really is. That's what government is. It's service delivery. It's giving you the things that you want to use and to take care of yourself. And right now, I think that cities are where government works best. But still, those services are lagging massively behind public expectations, public need, public experience, and the public narrative. And there's reasons for that, and we've talked about some of them today, right? There's so many tech-enabled solutions right now. You can click your phone, and you can book a plane ticket, you can be on the other side of the world. But my Presto card does not work. So frustrating. There are also more people, right? We're growing exponentially. The city is getting bigger and bigger. There's more people with more needs. All the systems are overwhelmed. And other levels of government are doing less. And we've also bought into this narrative that investing in government tools is wasteful. And so you have these billion-dollar municipalities that are running these things using clipboards and fax machines because we haven't invested in the infrastructure that's required. Cities and government are falling behind the pace of change, behind the pace of trust. There's a think tank in the States called New America that talked about this recently, and they said this chasm between expectations and service delivery isn't just frustrating, it's eroding any remaining trust we have that the government is there to help us. The more removed our experiences with government feel from our day-to-day lives, the less we trust that government will make good on its promises. And I think we're seeing that. People don't think that government is doing right by them, and so they are opting out or they're opting in to really bad alternatives. And so I think if cities are where services are most closely associated with government and their reflected success or failure, then the future of cities and of government technology is important because we have the opportunity to prove that government is capable and focused on offering and improving the services on which people rely. If we can do that, if we can make those things better, we can be the place where sort of reality trumps ideology, right? And we pull people back into what's possible. And I think we do this by getting stuff done, right? By actually building things. If we can get people back to sort of seeing the universal satisfaction of getting shit done, of seeing something get better, that is so satisfying. And so I think that cities and city technology is where we sort of change that story. And for government, they need to understand that technology is just part of that process. It's a tool. It's a mechanism to better deliver services. That's all it is. A tool in your toolkit, like many others, as you work to improve the support that you give to people who call your city or your province or your country home. So that's one thing. It's important. Disruption is a myth. I think that the language that we use around technology and innovation is sort of a blessing and a curse, right? It gets everyone's attention. We talk about startups and disruption and being agile, all those things. But I also think that they can do a disservice to the work that's already being done in government. And it can serve as a bit of a barrier, right? It's a kind of othering. You're like, oh, you're gonna disrupt me, or we're gonna use AI. All those things kind of get in the way, I think, of actually getting work done. I also think that cities are being disrupted all the time. They're being reimagined all the time. Technology is a tool, it's not a threat. The world is a threat. The world will disrupt you. Pandemics will disrupt you. Weather will disrupt you. Technology is just a tool, and it can be wielded well. Tech companies are just vendors, okay? We treat them like they're special snowflakes sometimes, of oh, you're very special. You've come up with this cool app. They're just vendors, right? Don't be scared of that. Don't be intimidated. Don't look away. Just work with them. This is the least popular slide that It's not procurement's fault, okay? People don't like it when I say that. I really believe that it's not procurement's fault. When I was at the City of Toronto, I was involved in a number of really innovative procurement approaches, most of which I stole from Andy Best from the City of Guelph. We partnered with a company called MyoVision on the Bloor Street bike lane project through a pilot procurement. We single-sourced to MyoVision then on the King Street Transit project. We did a negotiated RFP, which is a really cool way of doing things when we were replacing the recreation sign-up system, which allowed us to talk to the vendors through the process and actually tell them what we needed and how we were going to build it. We did a challenge-based procurement. That's what I stole from Andy, putting a problem out to the world and inviting people to sort of build a solution with us. And we got 10 responses to that in 3 weeks. And the normal responses to a City of Toronto procurement is like 1 or 2. So procurement is not the problem. People are the problem. Excuses are the problem. Miscalculated notions of risk are the problem. Sometimes lawyers are the problem. But with the right people in place, I think, and the right conversations and the right mandate, procurement is not the issue. It's just leadership. Leadership is the issue. Okay. So those are some of the things that I think that the government side needs to be thinking about, but there's a deficit on the other side as well. The tech sector needs to evolve as well. The vendors need to evolve as well. I think there's a lack of sort of, civics knowledge within the broader society, like everybody in general, but I think in technology in particular. I think there's a huge deficit of that. And it's not malicious. I don't think people are like actively doing that, but I think that we need to reground ourselves in an understanding of what government does and what their mandate is to help vendors co-create solutions. I'm asked to meet all the time with people who are developing urban tech or government tech solutions, or investors who want to invest in government tech. And it's kind of shocking how little people know about the current state, about what's actually happening and what all the considerations are. People don't know the scale of the issue or what's being done or what might get in the way of their solution when it's rolled out really widely in a government setting. So what does tech need to know about government? It's way harder than anybody thinks, right? And I think like a lot of you in the room know this. I once asked like a panel of technology CEOs, yeah, it's not going to be 2 minutes, but I'll look at your sign. I asked a panel, like, who are the leaders outside of technology that you look up to, that you draw inspiration from? And to my surprise, one of them actually named the head of a hospital. And everybody in the room was like, oh, public sector, like, what are you talking about? And he's like, this person manages a customer base that does not want to be there, a fully unionized staff, and he gets funded by the government. Like, think about how hard that is. That is the hardest thing you could do. They're doing stuff that's way harder than we are. I think this is an important acknowledgement and one that many in the private sector are really loath to acknowledge how hard it is. Cities and governments are difficult, they're demanding, they're diverse in their populations and in their service requirements. Think about the City of Toronto. They have a $13 billion annual operating budget. They have more than 11,000 staff, 3 million stakeholders. And if you think about that in terms of a company, that's like a massive, like Fortune 500 company. Like that is a hard shit to deal with. And I think people need to recognize that. That is not to excuse the areas of failure. Like God knows there's a lot, right? There's so many opportunities to make it better, but it's to offer some context. And I think we have to constantly offer this context of the reality of service delivery improvements in this setting. I was at a dinner once with the new head of Uber, and he was sort of being congratulatory about moving 40,000 people around in the City of Toronto. And I leaned over to the city manager of Toronto. I'm like, do you ever just want to headbutt these guys? Like, you move 2.5 million people on the TTC every day. Like, thank you for 40,000 without making any money. Good job. Tech people think what they're doing is hard, and it is. It's really difficult to build a new thing, a new solution. But nothing is as hard as government. I really believe that. Everyone is not like you. This is something I say all the time. It is a massive, massive blind spot for everybody, for me too, right? You have to constantly remind yourself, everyone is not like you. People's experiences here and everywhere, they vary depending on how much money you make, where you come from, the color of your skin, whether you're First Nations, if you have kids, how far away you live from your job. And they don't all have phones, and they don't all have Wi-Fi, and they're not all citizens, and they don't all speak English, and you cannot solve for all of them with one platform. And when you work in government, you cannot knowingly leave any of them behind. And it's really, really difficult. It'll speed up from here, I swear to God. Governance matters. I think we're starting to get this a little bit, especially right now. I could have used a less apocalyptic example than the current public health threat that we're facing, but it matters, right? You see how different countries are reacting to it. Governance matters. And I honestly wish more technology people thought about that. I met this evolutionary biologist recently. His name's Jeffrey West. He wrote a book called Scale, which is really amazing. And he looked at why, physical beings, live and they grow and their heart beats a certain amount of time and they die. Cities grow exponentially. Cities are almost impossible to kill. You can literally drop like a nuclear bomb on one, or you can have a flood go through one, and it will keep going. Companies die. Companies grow and they go and they die really quickly. And his conclusion was that cities, like biological forms, are designed to feed every cell, right? Everything goes to everything, and that's why we survive. Companies aren't like that. And so we really have to think about how do we design to make sure that we're feeding every cell. Okay. So what do we do differently? How do we move forward? If you want to get more technology solutions, how do we bridge these divides in these worlds? Somebody else talked about this earlier, but we have to tell the stories, right? On both sides, we have to tell the stories better. To fully utilize the potential of outside partners, cities and governments have to actually be better at explaining what they're doing and what they're trying to do, about why it's hard, what the things are that are getting in the way. And technology has to do a better job of explaining what they do too, and how it can help and how it can be rolled out. A panel earlier was talking about this in the context of how do you get funding for it? And I think storytelling is a big part of this. You have to enumerate the cost of doing nothing or the cost of doing what you're doing right now. This is what I would always say in government. I'm like, you're already paying for it, right? You're gonna pay for it one way or another. So this is like a cheaper option or a more sustainable option, but we have to tell those stories. You have to prioritize and you have to focus. I don't know if you guys know what a tech stack is, but you have to build it out like a tech stack, right? It's not one thing. You have to think about all the tools that you want to use simultaneously. There's no email system, there's no CRM, there's nothing that's gonna solve for all of your problems. There's literally no CRM that solves anyone's problems. I would say every fourth company that applies to OneEleven is like, we have a new CRM. I'm like, oh, good luck with that. You have to show that technology solutions can be deployed effectively for the public good. And I think, the government leaders who were talking earlier, I think that's been a sort of successful thing that people have done of like, okay, let's do this thing over there, and we'll show people that it's okay, and we'll show people that we didn't burn a lot of money over it, and build out from there, right? You have to build up your tech stack. Research. I would say anecdotally, this is the #1 deficit that I see across the board with everybody. People's inability to actually find out and understand what's going on. It's amazing to me. I'm like, half of my calls, the first thing I think, I'm like, did you Google this before you called me? Did you put the minimal amount of effort into finding out if that already exists or something's already being done, or why that's maybe a problem? Learn about things, look things up, read, and the government side too, read about tech companies, read about the solutions, it's all out there. Find your translators. And I would argue that the people in this room probably are the translators, right? Find the people who can bridge both sides of this. There are people who speak both languages, and you have to seek them out and you have to elevate them. You don't have to be a pool guy. You don't have to have a pool guy. I can be your pool guy. Luke can be your pool guy, right? I know a guy who knows that. When we were doing Bloor Street, I asked somebody from Communitech, I'm like, we want to measure, the movement of people, safety, how people are spending their money and public sentiment. And he said that's Myovision plus Metric Wire plus Tulip, right? So then we partnered with those things. You can find it. Find the people in government who have actually implemented technology, not the pretenders, not the people who Instagram their Post-it notes. There's a lot of that out there, I'm sorry. Find the people who have done the work. I think that also anybody who wants to work in this realm, any vendor who comes into government, should be required to have a briefing. We brief ministers, we brief new politicians all the time to give them the context. That should be part of the process. That should be part of RFPs. Hey, here's how hard this problem is. Come help us solve it. They shouldn't just sort of cover the scope of the project. It shouldn't just be a document that you could skim. You should really engage in it. You should really talk through what the issues are. Government should learn about technology too, and this might be an unpopular opinion in here, but I don't think people need to learn how to code, but they need to understand how technology works, how to procure it, what kind of runway these companies have in order to be able to work with government. They need to learn about that stuff too. It's implementation, not innovation. I'm sorry, we talk about culture eating strategy for breakfast. Implementation eats innovation. You have to have a plan to roll it out. I think that word should be stricken from people's mouths in government, innovation. You're innovating all the time. It's just a new way of doing things. So I think we should talk about implementation a lot more. I want to end with just a really, really quick, because I know I'm over, example of how I think we did this effectively in Toronto. The King Street pilot project, you guys know that? Where we made a section of King Street priority for transit. That was not successful because of innovation. You cannot just say it would be super innovative to not have cars on King Street and presto, it's done, everybody's happy. You can't expect the problem to be solved with an idea. The truth is that the TTC had been innovating for a while. They had tried out a bunch of different things. They had changed the stops. They'd done all kinds of things, and it didn't work. But they had to tell the story, right? They had to say, there are 60,000 people who take that streetcar every day, and there's 11,000 people who drive on that street every day. So what do we want to prioritize? We also had to solve for everybody. And I think this is part of the problem in Toronto and elsewhere, is we tend to polarize around identity groups, right? So you're a cyclist, you're a driver, or you're suburban, you're downtown. And we sort of solve for one person. And I think that King Street was interesting because we really thought through how do we solve for everybody. So we're like, okay, the cars will go over here, TTC will go here, we'll do this with the business owners. We really kept the narrative alive for all groups and not just one group, and that helped bring everybody along. We also had vendors who understood the problem. We had worked with Myovision already, so they understood what we were up against in terms of data privacy. I know, I'm almost done. And we implemented. We had divisions working together. We had the public and private sector involved. We measured, we adapted, we communicated. I believe that government is absolutely necessary, and I believe absolutely that technology is a tool that can be useful. I love to swim, but I don't want to drown. I don't want other people to drown. I want everyone to be safe, and that's both the easiest and the hardest thing in the world. It's hard because it matters so much because the stakes are really high, but it's the easiest because with the willingness to change and to adapt, and ultimately to serve the public interest and to always focus on the public interest, there's nothing stopping us from doing this at all. So thank you.